Before the Terminator, before Aliens, and before Titanic, James Cameron made a film he'd probably rather forget. It was called Piranha II: The Spawning, a low-budget horror sequel about genetically engineered flying killer fish. And yes, James Cameron directed it. Well, sort of. Before I dive in, I'd like to give a shout out to my friend Josh for sending me this idea along with many of the details this video will cover. Thanks, brother. Now, back on subject. Released in 1982, Piranha II: The Spawning was billed as James Cameron's directorial debut. But the story behind it is anything but straightforward. The original Piranha, directed by Joe Dante and written by John Sayles, had been a scrappy but clever Jaws parody. The sequel? A bizarre mess of horror schlock and production drama. At first, James Cameron wasn't even the director. He was hired as the film's special effects supervisor, brought on for his low-budget ingenuity. But then something unexpected happened. Miller Drake, the original director, was fired early into production. Cameron was suddenly promoted to director, not because the producers believed in his vision, but because he was cheap, available, and willing. That's when the trouble really started. The film was being financed and controlled by Ovidio G. Asinitis, an Italian producer notorious for interfering in productions. According to multiple accounts, Asinitis ran the shoot with an iron grip. He hired an Italian crew, many of whom didn't even speak English, and exerted total creative control, often overriding Cameron on key decisions. And then, just 2.5 weeks into production, Cameron was fired. Asinitis took over himself, just as he had done on other projects in the past. In fact, firing directors and stepping in to finish the movie was kind of his thing. But here's the kicker. Cameron's name had to stay on the film. The studio contractually required an American name on the director's credit, and Asinitis, being Italian, couldn't fulfill that requirement. So even though Cameron wasn't allowed near the editing room, his name remained on the final cut. In short, James Cameron directed parts of Piranha II, but it was taken from him before he could shape it into anything resembling his own work. So what's left of Cameron in Piranha II? Maybe not much on screen, but the experience, however painful, helped fuel his drive to never lose creative control again. Just a couple of years later, he'd explode onto the scene with the Terminator, a project he co-wrote, directed, and fully commanded. Still, a few interesting connections did carry over from this aquatic horror disaster, such as Lance Henriksen, who played police officer Steve Kimbrough in Piranha II, would go on to work with Cameron again in both the Terminator and Aliens. And Miller Drake, the director Cameron replaced, eventually worked as a visual effects editor on The Abyss, Terminator 2, and True Lies. Then there's Captain Kid Brewer Jr., who played the character Lou. He also appeared in The Abyss, which was his final film before passing away in 1990. The 1992 special edition of The Abyss includes a dedication to his memory. And lastly, Trisha O'Neill, who starred as in Kimbrough, made a Blink and You'll Miss Me cameo in Titanic years later. So while Piranha 2 might be a footnote in film history, it served as a strange launchpad for one of the most influential directors of all time. Sure, it may be a cheesy B-movie about flying fish, but behind the scenes, it was a training ground and a nightmare that shaped the James Cameron we know today. A director who learned the hard way. Never let someone else take your movie out of your hands. And maybe, just maybe, don't agree to direct a killer fish sequel. Thanks for watching.